Yeah, so certainly the African continent is going to have to build a very strong uh, form of engine for its rapid development, rapid, advancement forward, and for that, we mean rapid development, not just quantitatively, but also qualitatively. And the African heads of state, of course, have attempted to do that in one way or the other, but most especially with the Agenda 2063, and specifically the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. But there's a lot of flaws with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and some of those flaws, of course, the Secretary General himself, Wamkele Meni, has started pointing them out. Uh, Cohesion. These loose states do not respect the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And a few weeks ago, he was complaining about the fact that South Africa has not signed up to the Pan African Payment and Settlement System. And of course, that is a subject for another day, the behavior of South Africa as a member of the Africa Continental uh, free, free trade area, or a member of the African Union, and the fact that, of course, it is so integrated with the Western system that the West almost sees South Africa as a country which is not African. So that's a topic for another day. But the Africa Continental Free Trade Area could have been a good start, but it lacks the basics. For the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, how it appears, it is like building a house, starting from the roof, right? You don't have the walls and you don't have the foundation. So there's no way you can say that this house is a real house without a foundation. And by the foundation, I mean that the base infrastructure which is necessary to have that system work, the base infrastructure necessary to have the Africa Continental Free Trade Area operate smoothly, is non-existent. So there's no way you can say I'm going to trade without the base infrastructure, like transportation, for example, simplified communication. And of course, you want to appreciate the people who are making effort in that side. People like Wam Kelemene, who's a very convinced person, who's the Secretary General, very, very convinced person about Africa and the potential of the African continent. He is very convinced. But it could be also true that the African heads of state are doing all these things to put off what is really supposed to be done. Now, that foundation has not been built. You don't have roads, you don't have a cheap transport means for the continent, you don't have an integrated communication system, and you don't have the source of energy. You don't have the energy. Now, that is the foundation in itself. And of course, you are not producing enough food. We have had the president of the African Development Bank complaining also, and of course, whipping up some level of optimism that Africa will be able to compete when it comes to production of food. But it will really not be able to compete if people don't get serious, or things don't really get serious on this African continent. Now, the walls, the walls are like what you would call industrialization. And of course, the energy, which we said as part of the foundation, is supposed to power the walls. The walls are supposed to stand on the foundation before you put the roof on top. So The walls, they represent the products that you're going to trade in. What are you going to trade in? Have you produced what you're going to trade in? If you have not produced, then what are you saying that you're going to trade? What are you going to trade if you have not produced any products? And that is a question. So you have to have industrialization. You have to industrialize the continent before you can even talk about trading with yourself. So as you can see, basically, we have a problem that this engine that has been built is faulty. And me and my company, called the Century Rail Limited, we are proposing a real engine, the real foundation. We are proposing the building of a foundation, and we have shown where the money can be gotten from, where the money will be gotten from to build this engine. And that engine which we are talking about is a continental integrated railway platform, which we have called the Africa Railway Triangle Network Master Plan, the African Railway Triangle Network Master Plan. And along that railway platform will come also a communication platform. So what we are trying to achieve is two things at the same time here. We are trying to build a transport system, and then we are building a communication system for the continent, for all the continent. So we will have to lay a cable across the railway line, a fiber optic cable, which will pass everywhere, which will go everywhere where the railway platform is passing to connect all the African continent. So the railway itself will be at a cost of around $150 billion, and the fiber optic cable will be at a cost of around $2 billion. Now, like I said, we have already identified how to raise this money, and it's a sure deal how we're going to raise this money. So this is the engine that we are talking about. Now, this model, once it succeeds in the next 20 years, 15 to 20 years, we will have that railway. These can be transferred to the power systems, because to be honest, we have problems with power all across the African continent. Some of the most advanced economies and the biggest economies on the African continent are still facing energy challenges. And of course, you can talk about South Africa, you can talk about Nigeria. We have seen the power problems. Now, why have I started with those? I've started with those simply because it is important to understand that if the big countries, the biggest economies and the most advanced economy on the African continent, which is South Africa, and the biggest, which is Nigeria, are suffering from power problems, what do you think then is going to happen to countries like Sierra Leone? Sierra Leone for itself is suffering to the point that 90% of the people don't have access to electricity. It's only about 10% people who have access to electricity, and those people live in Freetown. So how can we then develop our continent if 90% of the people do not have access to electricity? It becomes very impossible, extremely impossible. It cannot happen. So this same model of fundraising can be used to fundraise or to raise funds for the construction of projects like the Inga Dam. And this Inga Dam would provide, of course, electricity for the biggest part of Central Africa, maybe some of East Africa and Southern Africa, about 40,000 megawatts. Okay, so if you build this, then at least you have a starting point then to talk about industrialization and build some solar panel facilities, solar panel manufacturing in the Sahel, and harvest the sunlight and have at least people have access to this energy. And also this dam and this energy which you have provided in the Democratic Republic of Congo, you could set up industries there which you are going to build some of the equipment that is required to produce that energy, like batteries and lithium batteries and all of the other electronics. That's where you start from, and then you use those to go and power the Sahel, which requires the batteries to operate. And we could use the same model. Now, on on a more advantageous side, again, this same railway system, out of that $150 billion, will come with industries such as steel manufacturing. We will manufacture our own steel, setting a stage for a steel manufacturing industry on the African continent out of that same money. And at the same time, money will come from that same amount to build and enhance Africa's cement industry, setting up a cement industry to complement the efforts of people like Dangote. Okay? And we see this as very advantageous. Now, from the same railway platform, you will see that you set up machining shops, and it will also come with the fact that you will be able to set up a railway industry, a railway manufacturing, trains manufacturing industry on the African continent, from rolling stock to bogies, because all these they require steel, which is going to be fed from the steel industry, and you're going to be able to spark the construction industry with this kind of steel later on, because basically the steel is going to be for producing the rails that are going to be used in building the railway lines. And of course the cement is for the concrete, which is going to be used for the slabs which are on the rail, or the so-called sleepers. Now we produce everything which we need. So the manufacturing of railway systems, signaling and rolling stock, will come from the fact that we are going to finance this project by ourselves as Africans. Now, in financing this project as Africans, it means that we can dictate to the subcontractors, because we want to have the overall contractor of the project to be an African. Now, all these other companies will be subcontractors to this project. Now, this means that we can dictate that we want technology transfer, whether it is Alstom of France, whether it is the CRRC of China. Any of them who comes on board to subcontract on the project will require them to build, technology transfer facilities here, so that our students can learn how to build these trains, hence setting the stage for the building of trains, an industry for building trains on African soil, building signaling systems, building bogies, and building all the other technologies and electronics, and robotics and all that, which is very important, mechatronics, which is very, very important for the African continent, communication systems. So these are the advantage. With this, then it means that you have built a solid engine that is very difficult even to stop once you talk about trading, because trading requires you to produce at home, but also have the infrastructure which is necessary for you, to base on to trade. It's just like a computer. You are supposed to have hardware, and then you have software. So software sits on the hardware. Without the hardware, you cannot have software. All right, software is useless. So it's the same thing. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area is just like software. Now, without the infrastructure which is the hardware, there's no way you're going to operate. You can't operate on this continent without these kind of infrastructure, without this kind of hardware. And that is what we are proposing. This is the most important thing that we are proposing. So the other thing is that when it comes to manufacturing today, for you to succeed, you are supposed to produce at scale. You're supposed to produce at scale. And I'll give you an example of Europe, that Europe and the United States, they have all these technologies, but these technologies now, they're not useful to them because they can't produce at scale. All right, and China is beating them. We can talk about the electric vehicles as an example, and of course all the other products like solar panels. Now, by producing at scale at home, first of all, you're supposed to have a big market at home in order to support the growth itself. And this is the new way of manufacturing, that if you don't have it, you're not going to succeed. So you should have uh, a big market at home. You should be able to grow at home with your manufacturing, and then you go out there after succeeding at home. And Africa has all these important ingredients. And of course, this has helped China to beat the Western world. So it is now no more enough to just have expertise and have access to these technologies, but rather the new way of manufacturing in the new era. Manufacturing in the new era requires you to manufacture at scale in order to succeed. It's almost like manufacturing of aircraft. The West is spooked by China's approach to manufacturing, including aircraft, is because China can manufacture at scale at home and succeed. And when it succeeds, it means that their biggest market, they have lost it. They're not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be sustainable at home for Boeing and Airbus to produce. And maybe the only market they will remain with is the Chinese market, and it's the Indian market, is the market in India, and the market in Africa. Now, this means that you have to produce at scale. If Africa wants to succeed, it has to produce at scale. So this is where the problem of a few elements who are trying to cling on to these colonial states become a problem. They are standing, these are some of the people, this is one of the stumbling blocks, that these people are an enemy to Africa's growth and rapid development and moving forward. And such people, of course, have to be dealt with, in whatever way that has to be dealt with, so that they can be removed out of the way, because they are standing, clearly standing in the way for Africa's progress. These small states, they cannot make progress. They cannot produce at scale. They cannot compete with the rest of the world. When the world requires you to have the technologies which they don't have even already, and it requires you to produce at scale before you can go out there to compete, it means that you need a unified Africa. You need a unified African market. You need a unified African state for us to achieve that. So this is our solution, and this is the solution that we are presenting to the African people, for them to come out and support it. My company is working studiously to bring all these pieces together that are supposed to, to join hands in building the new Africa that we want. Of course, an Africa that will feed its children, and not only those on the continent, but also those in the diaspora, because the diaspora children of Africa have a stake in the African continent. It's not only those ones on the continent who have a stake in the continent, but Africa's children outside also have a stake, whether they are Jamaicans, whether they are Americans, African Americans, so-called African Americans, whether they are Barbadians, whether they have a stake in the African continent. So for you to be able to take care of the interests of all these people, you are supposed to start by building a very strong engine, and you have to be aware of these realities, and of course which realities these small states which we have currently are not aware of. They are not aware of these realities. They don't know that these things exist, and they're supposed to approach it in this way. Before you talk about rapid development, before you talk about trading with each other, you are supposed to have this strong foundation, produce and understand where the world is moving, and then you will be able to succeed. And that is the solution that we are proposing, that we should build an unstoppable engine that will be able to propel the African continent to the next phase of industrialization. The industrialization, we saw it happened. The first industrial revolution, it happened in Britain. The second industrial revolution happened in the US. The third industrial revolution is happening in China currently, and therefore we would want the fourth industrial revolution to happen on the African continent, because the African continent is the only place that is remaining. But unlike everybody else who has been depending on other people's resources to spark their industrial revolution, we want Africa to depend on its own resources. We have the capability of depending on our own resources, both material and GDP, and also human. We want to depend on our own resources to carry out that industrial revolution that is needed for the African continent. And that engine that we are proposing is the starting with building, a railway platform across the continent by my company called Century Rail. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you later. Thank you.